I would say to get started. I think that said a lot, but I really believe it and mean it because you can really stop yourself from pursuing something. And I had a lot of people who were just telling me that this is going to be really hard. Why are you spending so much time on it? It's not that they didn't wish well for me when I look back, but I think that their negativity sort of motivated me too.
Are you super stressed out? Maybe a victim of panic attacks? Maybe you have too much anxiety? Welcome to Mobile Heroes Uncensored, where it's always super chill, right, Peggy? My name is John Koetsier. Our co-host, of course, as always, is Peggy and Salz. And today we're not chatting about performance meetings with your manager, unless we are. We're chatting about the founder of an app for people who suffer from anxiety, stress, and panic attacks. And frankly, last 3 years, who hasn't? She's bootstrapped her app to 2 million users. I mean, bootstrapped her app to 2 million users. Amazing. And has a suitcase full of awards. Peggy, who is this person we're chatting with?
Yeah, what can I say, John? Can I say a rock star, perhaps? And chilled, a chilled rock star. We have Ania Wyshocka. She is founder and creator of Rooted, which is a mobile app, as you said, panic attacks. So it's for panic attack victims, it's for anxiety relief. And she has grown it to help over 2 million users. But what's really interesting is the backstory because Anya built the freemium app to help her cope with her own anxieties and comfort the panic stricken. She's on a mission, but she's also more than empathetic and a great entrepreneur. She's been selected for a number of awards. So I'll just rattle them off, John. A couple might be familiar because they're in your backyard. Developer Spotlight by Apple. She's also 30 Under 30 winner by BC Business. A Canadian woman in tech, you should know, is another one of her accolades, and one of the 20 women entrepreneurs to watch by Founders Fund. This past year, Anya has been telling her story of how she bootstrapped Rooted. She's been on stage at Mal Vegas, where I met her. She's been at the App Growth Summit in London. She is on a world tour, and she's here to share it with us today here on Mobile Heroes Uncensored. Welcome, Anya. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
It is great to have you, and it's great to have somebody in my backyard. Yeah, BC is British Columbia. That is not in South America for those who are geographically challenged. It is a province on the western edge of Canada, just above Washington State. Let's start here, Anya. Tell us about the app, how it works.
So, Rooted is panic attack and anxiety relief in your pocket. It has a number of different tools to help you both immediately in the moment if you're struggling with a panic attack, like an actual SOS panic attack tool. And then it also has a number of things to help you manage anxiety in the long term. So, things like lessons to help understand what it is, what's actually going on in your body, breathing exercises, visualization tools, a sleep assistant, and journaling. And it's all gamified, so you collect points as you go.
Is anxiety? I mean, you clearly know this inside and out. You built the app for it. You've got professional resources to help with that. Is it something that some people have chronically, but others sort of have episodically and sort of comes about quickly? How does it act, and how's your app help?
It's definitely a range. So there's general anxiety, or there's at the point where it gets to a panic attack, which is very heightened anxiety. And panic attacks can come seemingly out of nowhere. Oftentimes, we don't really know what's ailing or bugging us, or that we're kind of keeping it inside for a long time. And that's what happened to me. I was in my final year of university when I had a panic attack, and it just completely flabbergasted me. I was so confused about what was happening. I went to a doctor. They basically said, "You're fine," which made me even more confused because I didn't have these resources on hand to like explain what was happening. And it was really a difficult time for me.
But I love how you turn a problem into a solution for a lot of people. I mean, the fact that you have built an app based on your own experience. Tell us a little bit more about how you have done that. I mean, you have doubled your users. You've bootstrapped 0 to 1 million now 2 million, so even more. All of these stories have interesting days. Yours has an interesting origin based on your experience at the university and what you later did, but share a couple of the stories about the early days of the project.
Yeah, so when I was first starting, I took these ideas for tools and wireframes that I had, and I went to an agency and I got a quote from an agency on what it would cost to develop it. And there's just no way that I could ever afford that. So I kind of just kept at it. I really started teaching myself more about wireframing, just realizing that I have to do a lot of this on my own. And then finally, I worked with a student developer who could give me a great rate, but also was curious himself about like what this project might be. So that's kind of how it got started. And then when it comes to marketing, those early days, it was a lot about user engagement online, a lot about app store optimization. I made sure to focus on panic attacks versus anxiety because I knew anxiety was more of a competitive space and with venture backed giant apps. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was very important for me to like focus on that niche. And yeah, that was, those early stages. Also PR. So a lot of people don't think that PR is great for like a super small startup, but actually I find that local organizations and local publications are really happy to write about a new startup in the area. So that's also something that I relied on for the first few hundred users, right? Not thousands, but hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very important cohort, isn't it? I mean, to get people on board, to see the app being used, to see what they're doing, what they're using, what they're not using, all that stuff. Super interesting. What would you give as advice for other founders who want to kick something off and maybe aren't technical? They're looking for the technical co-founder, which is this mythical quest that, is really, really hard to do. What advice would you give?
I would say to get started. I think that said a lot, but I really believe it and mean it because you can really stop yourself from pursuing something. And I had a lot of people who were just telling me that this is going to be really hard. Why are you spending so much time on it? It's not that they didn't wish well for me when I look back, but I think that their negativity sort of motivated me too. I think, yeah, there's just so many people that said, why are you doing this? And just going for it really helped. And also, bootstrapped apps, especially when I was starting it, it wasn't talked about that much. Everything was about venture backed apps, venture backed funded companies in general. So I didn't get a lot of hype around being bootstrapped. And I guess I would also tell somebody else, like, you could still do it bootstrapped, even
Mm-hmm.
if others aren't saying that you should or can.
Gotta ask though, another why question. You were plagued by them at the start. I'll add to it because it is about raising money. That's what everyone says is the golden ticket. They want to do it. They go to the events, it's that's where they find that funding. But you determined to be self-funded. Why is that?
A few different reasons. I think that exposure to the startup community, whether that was online or in person, really showed me that fundraising can be really distracting. It becomes a full time job. And I met with a lot of founders who shared that the reason why they started their company, they're no longer doing that. They're now full time fundraisers. So I didn't want that for myself personally. Another thing is I interacted with some investors and didn't have a great experience. And so I think I got sort of dismayed from that quite early on. And I thought, I know you shouldn't generalize people in general, but I did find that I was like, I don't know if this is a great fit. And I really do want Rooted to continue to be values based, which brings me to the third point. A lot of investors, their first suggestions were to have less free content, raise prices and do things that like make sense in their world, but it didn't necessarily make sense for Rooted and why I started Rooted. So I'd say those are like the top three reasons.
It's also interesting if you think about it, right? I mean, sometimes you start a company because you want to do what you want to do, and
Mhm.
some part of it you're your own boss. When you take on capital, not so much. There's a board of directors. There's people who are saying, "How are you deploying that capital? What are you doing? What are the results?" You basically hire yourself a boss.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for so many startups to raise capital, but with Rooted being a personal story for me and values based, I found those conversations really challenging with investors, and just decided that, maybe that'll change in the future. But for now, I'm really enjoying it and really enjoying focusing on the product and listening to the users and that exchange. And yeah, fortunately, I'll be able to keep going like this. So we'll see what happens in the future, though.
Well, I think you'll be going because look at what you've already done, right? 1 million, 0 to 1 million, now double in a year. And to generate that revenue, you have chosen the freemium app model. Before I ask you some deeper questions, I just have to understand that as well, because there are so many different marketers who say, no, just, and we've had them too, John, remember, don't even bother. Just your paywall is like, here's what it costs, and that's it. So don't have that type of model to start. What made you choose it?
I guess it certainly goes back to the origin story again, how I didn't have the resources to get the help that I needed. And in that context, it was more like regular therapy sessions, which can be quite expensive as a student on student loans. In this context, obviously, Rooted is a lot more affordable than that already. It's $60 a year. So that is much more digestible than the costs I had to face when I was struggling myself. But at the same time, there are some cases where people can't even afford that, right? So I do want to be mindful of that and make sure there's no big financial constraints. So the things that are free in the app are things that help immediately in the moment, like the panic attack button.
Mm.
So that's why. And I think I had actually read a blog, this was like back in 2017, about somebody who started with just a paid app, and their biggest regret was that they didn't go freemium because they missed out on so much opportunity of users who could have converted later as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of stuck with me. And, it's been quite a few years now. So there's different strategies and trends when it comes to monetization. But I think that also influenced me.
It's interesting that you characterize it as $60 a year. Clearly, that's a subscription. Is it an annual subscription or is it monthly?
It's primarily, well, our most popular plans are annual, but it's also, there's a monthly option as well.
Okay. I find that interesting. I find that an easier sell often than a monthly subscription. I don't know. Maybe there's different classes of things because like for Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever, monthly makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. You're getting value all the time. But maybe for anxiety, maybe it's a different category of things. Maybe you go 3 months without having a panic attack. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but maybe that I can imagine that being happier. I can have a more stressful period of my life. Having an annual subscription, I don't know, seems to make sense for me in that sense.
It sounds a little bit like a security blanket, like, hey, it's not going to go away overnight. I've got $60 for the year. I'm pretty intrigued by the panic button now. I have to.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking about that, and that's one of the free aspects. So that's like immediate gratification and satisfaction in that moment. I'm just curious. I have to ask you, Ania, what does it do?
Yeah, so it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It's based on the idea of either confronting the sensation that you're experiencing during a panic attack or accepting it to kind of push it away for the moment and feel better in the moment. So there's two options based on how you're feeling. It's an interactive tool. You can, again, choose to challenge that feeling or just feel okay in the moment. Let's say you're on a busy subway or in a crowd or about to go to work and you don't want to deal with it. So the one that helps you kind of push it away for the time being gives you these prompts that really remind you why you're okay, why you've survived every panic attack to date. All of these things that you know, but in the moment when you're feeling heightened anxiety, you might forget. And then the other option challenges you to really accept those sensations. So that's how the panic attack button works. And then there's an option to call an emergency contact. There's an option to jump into the deep breathing or the visualizations as well.
Mm-hmm.
Super, super interesting. Again, as a total noob to this whole thing, it strikes me as if you have a playbook that you can follow, like a series of steps, you can normalize, right? You can almost self-medicate in some sense. Is that how it works?
In this sense, yeah. So we definitely don't want to replace anything any other resources that you're using, and we encourage people to see doctors, see therapists. But Rooted is a really great symbiotic tool to those other important resources, especially when they're not available. So let's say it's the middle of the night and you can't call your doctor, you can't call your therapist. Then you have Ron, which is the app mascot, who can guide you through a panic attack then. And therapists and psychologists, doctors are some of our top referrers. So I think it works quite
Nice.
nicely together.
I love that idea because I know a lot of people who've either had panic attacks. Everyone has to deal with them at some point. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of us do. And it's just like this, hey, it's okay. It's all right. And now you've got like this app and a little bit of gamification and just trying to just treat it as a normal part of your life and not, getting focused on it. And that takes a lot of effort in the product. But also, I'd like to talk a bit more about how you arrived at what works for your app. Can you share some of the experiences and experiments, whether it's for the product or for the paywall that you have as well? I mean, what are some of those learnings from those experiments?
Yeah, so regarding features, it was largely intuitive at the time when I was struggling. I was kind of creating and designing and wireframing things that I found very comforting, things that I wish I had known, things that I wish I had access to when I was really struggling. So that's definitely the basis for the features themselves. And then when it comes to the monetization, like you asked, the paywall, that took a few experiments for sure. I definitely offered most of Rooted for free at the beginning and still continue to offer a lot for free. So that freemium model, while we did have conversions, it wasn't so high. And then the most simple tactic that was really effective for me was introducing the paywall during the onboarding process, as opposed to just having locked content in the app and accessing a paywall then. And at first I was so nervous. I was thinking that people might get really offended or, maybe it's just not the right fit for the type of app that Rooted is. However, the amount of people that complained was so small, like less than, 10 in the first few months. And I was seeing so many benefits in terms of the actual conversions and then what I can do with that revenue as well, right? Like it just make Rooted better and better. So I think that people are super used to seeing paywalls during the onboarding process now, and that's why we didn't get a negative reaction from the public. It was mostly just super understood, and I probably could have done it sooner.
Nice, but you only know when you try. That's
Yes.
excellent. Talk about localization and personalization. You're working to localize your app to different countries. Of course, there's a language thing, but there's probably much more than a language thing in this type of app specifically. But you're also trying to personalize your app a little bit more. Talk about what you're doing in those areas.
So in terms of localization, we're actually available in 10 different languages now. And it is primarily the change in language. There are some cultural differences, like you said. For example, in Brazil, we learned that the name Ron can't just be Ron, it has to be Ronnie. Like that's a cultural thing. And
Okay.
and there's certainly some sentences. There's some languages that, we use a lot more adjectives and adverbs as you speak, and others that are shorter. So that actually changes the design of the screen and the wireframe itself. So there have been some interesting challenges into localization, but overall it's been really positive. I'd say it was also, I call it the least businessy business decision I've made because it was also quite values based, but then it ended up bringing in more users from different countries as well. But there wasn't like a super clear marketing strategy for that in place. It was just mainly getting requests from users for those localizations and then reading reports about how bad the rate of panic attacks and anxiety is in some of the countries where we've localized.
Hmm.
So that was that
Including
experience.
Ukraine.
Yes, that's an example. Yeah, we get a lot of messages from folks in the Ukraine and Russia. Yeah.
Wow.
In terms of personalization, this is something that I'm still experimenting with now. I do ask more questions when users sign up for the app now, and that's to kind of get to know them a bit, just to really understand like what tool they're really going for in the app when they first sign up, because you can see that afterwards and see what users actually doing. But that intent when they first sign up, I think is really, really interesting to learn about. It's not always what they're going to be using in the app. And yeah, just trying to get to know the user a bit better. I do have some features planned for the future that might include a bit more personalization, but I probably shouldn't talk about them yet.
Big
But they're
secret.
coming. They're coming. That
Yes.
praise personalization is hot. I have to dive into that just a little bit deeper because it's really smart, first of all. If you want to inform your segmentation strategy, yes, you can do a lot of work with data sets, or you can simply ask. So you're asking
Mhm.
them, why are you here? What are you looking for? And then you can bring together that journey to suit that audience. But I'm hearing a lot in the industry now about how personalization has to start with pricing. And you should have almost as many pricing models as you have segments. And then you'll just show the different prices and the different paywalls and different onboarding to the different segments. Marketers are bullish about that. I'm about to go to a conference where it's going to be probably a hot topic, and some are going to preach it more than others. What do you make of that? Are they right?
I probably don't do as much segmentation as is probably recommended. Except for the most obvious ones like iOS versus Google Play and
Mm-hmm.
different demographics, age wise, language wise. That's about it. Like there's probably a lot more that I could be doing. I really enjoy hearing from users though. That's kind of like my main source of feedback and learning. So maybe a bit more qualitative over quantitative in some cases.
Can you talk about your team a little bit? How big is the team right now? Who does marketing? What does marketing consist of?
Yeah, so really small. So maybe that's also why we have more of that, qualitative versus quantitative approach. But I'm the only person that's on it full time. I have contractors who are there for development, junior and more senior developer. And then I have somebody doing social media engagement and somebody creating social media content. Not currently
Interesting.
advertising, but I will be in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I was wondering about that a little bit because you bootstrapped to 2 million users, which is impressive. It's amazing. I mean, there are not that many success stories that do something like that. It makes me think, I mean, totally different vertical, totally different app. Flappy Bird, if you remember that like 5, 6 years ago, Peggy, it was
Yeah.
that stupid game, tap, 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 to keep the bird up and not hit the pipes, right? And that went nuts and it went crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, he got so much money from that, he got attacked and it was really bad. And maybe
Well,
he needed an anxiety app. But it's interesting to talk about marketing. You're doing the strategy, you're doing most of the execution. You have somebody who's helping you, but you bootstrapped to 2 million on app stores and social media and PR. Those are the three tactics I've heard. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
I have played around with advertising. It just wasn't as successful as I would have hoped. So that's why I fail fast and then kind of take the learnings and then re-engage again in the future. And so now this next re-engagement is for Q1 2023. That's sort of how I have it planned out right now. I think that because of the organic traction, a lot of focus for me is on the in-product funnel and
Huh.
really understanding and utilizing the information user acquisition we have organically before going out and spending a lot. So that's sort of
Peggy, I
where I'm at.
wonder.
It's like 95% organic, and then the 5% has been through
wow.
ads. Yeah.
Interesting. Peggy, I wonder if there's a differentiation here between an app that's kind of, maybe just something that's fun, maybe a utility that you could have or you don't need to have or something like that. A vitamin that's kind of nice to have versus like a Band-Aid that you desperately need in the moment. And I wonder if there's a different marketing strategy based on that differentiation.
Makes sense because of the intent. The
Mm-hmm.
greater the intent, the more valuable the user. And she's obviously nailed valuable users, and just wants to fill the funnel with 5% more of them. The rest of them could be all the advocates across the 150 countries. I have to
Mm-hmm.
ask though, because if you're going into advertising, that means it's like going to be new territory for you. The exciting place where John and I are and
And
what.
it's a big landscape with
It's a
lots
big
going on.
landscape and it is so screwed up right now. So I have to understand. I have to understand where you're going to place your bets because most people are like, get me out of here. I want to go to brand or I want to go to brand formance. A lot of people going back to TV. Remember, John, we talked to a few. What are you looking at? And boy, are you brave, by the way.
Well, in terms of channels, I do find that like probably our demographic is on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the channels. And I will be working with a a contractor who has more experience than I do in this. And, I have tested out things and I've got to play around with creative. I've got to see what works, especially in terms of installs. It was more so about turning those installs into paid conversions. And that's where the issue was. So that's what I'm reattempting in 2023. It's not that I haven't ever tried. It just has been a lot more lucrative to focus on how to keep improving the product itself versus going out with advertising.
It is going to be a major step. It is going to be a big step, and wish you all the success in the world as you make that step. We've got to start drawing this to a bit of a close, and Peggy and I have a couple questions that we typically end with, and one of them is your least censored opinion about any aspect of mobile marketing. That could be interesting to you as somebody who's bootstrapped. What is your least censored opinion about mobile marketing?
Well, I guess it goes back to what we were just discussing, and perhaps that people do too much of it, or there's too much focus on it, where I think it really should start in the product. The product should be so sticky and so needed, like you said, the vitamin versus Band-Aid aspect, that I think that's where it should start. And sometimes I see apps asking me what they're doing wrong, and I don't know for sure, but that is something that I've noticed, is that there's so much focus on marketing when the product hasn't really been finished. So you're bringing users into something that's not quite going to keep them there.
Product-led growth, Peggy.
Yeah, product is marketing. Hearing it all the time because it's the only thing you can really fix right now. It's a little bit of one of those areas, we are at a time where there's only so many levers you have, right?
Yeah.
It's not the way it used to be. This is the time for apps like yours, right? We're gearing up. We're going to end the year. We're going to start the new one with a much better start than the last. So it's big times for health, mental wellness, well-being apps. Your top tips for mobile marketers heading into 2023, considering this is the time. What are your 3 top tips?
I'd say to really utilize the different Apple technologies that they're coming out with. So whether that's an in-app event, widgets, I found that to be really useful. And going back to segmentation, that's something that we do differently for iOS than Google Play for sure. And yeah, I find those to be so helpful, especially in getting your message across. With something like Rooted, where the focus is on panic attacks, tools like that allow me to take some time to also show users other aspects of the app, like journaling. And when I did an in-app event on journaling, all of a sudden I got all these reviews about how people love the journal tool. So it gives you an opportunity to present another aspect of your app that you might not be ranking as highly in. Another one would be to, again, focus on that product again. And I think maybe one tip could be using the help of an app mascot, like this guy right here. He's been very loved and supported and celebrated by users all around the world. So I'm really happy that I did choose to create something like that. And people have really personified him in a way that I wasn't sure they would. And I think that is continuing to be popular and getting even more popular, to have like a friend with you as you're journeying through the app.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it.
You have to number 3 coming, but you know what? Merchandise. Right. You've got another area you can get into. Because it's kind of cute. I can
the
see
plushie to hang on to.
Yeah. My friend made me this 3D version. Kind of cute. And we were talking about how we can expand that. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard as a bootstrap app. Maybe that's one of the negative aspects, is you have to be so focused that I haven't even been able to explore that.
Oh, blessing in disguise sometimes.
Yes.
Blessing in disguise.
I guess so, yeah.
Was there a third tip? There doesn't have to be. I mean, 2 is good. And the first one was really amazing too. Yeah. So if there is a third, we're happy to hear it.
I guess just with trends, experimenting a lot with the onboarding, that has been the most impactful for Rooted as a bootstrapped app, is just to take what's already in our control, something like the onboarding screens, and see what can happen there. Those have been the lowest lift, highest impact changes for us.
Nice.
Okay.
You know, Peggy, what this story, what Anya makes me want to do is we should start our own app. I don't even know what. I don't even know the vertical. We'll start our own app and we'll just like, put $1,000 into it every month or something like that to, build it, invest in it, grow it, all that stuff. And we'll apply everything we're hearing from every mobile hero. And we'll just see what works and what doesn't work.
That'd be
Then we'll keep a scorecard.
That'd be a cool
And we'll have a
experiment,
panic
though.
button if we waste all our money.
Hell, that sounds like fun. I'm in. I love experiments. And we've got the
Okay.
perfect sort of petri dish here going because
Yep.
we can even get the business ideas from what the app needs to do, right? So
I
yeah,
know.
very cool.
Well, Anya, this has been a super amazing pleasure to chat with you. Wish you the best of success. It's always great to hear from somebody who is bootstrapping and doing amazing and doing some good as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for the great questions. It was fun.
You're welcome. And I have to say, from my end, right, it's been a great interview, but also the fact that you have stuck to your values means a lot for me. Because if it's something I like, it's a grounded interview and a practical interview that we have that with you at Rooted. So a little bit of pun there, but a lot of appreciation.
Awesome. Thank
You
you
can
so
have
much.
your pun on that. When I first heard rooted, I thought it was like rooted as in you've been owned, hacked, pwned, your device has been rooted. But in any case,
I was
thank you so
thinking of
much.
vegetables, John. We're in such different worlds.
I guess we are.
And I was thinking of trees. You know how when there's like a huge oak tree and there's a storm, it's not going to rattle as much. That's the goal with Rooted. You want to stay rooted and get through the hard times.
Cool.
Love it. We all need some of it. And thank you to all listeners. We really do appreciate you. Hope you're enjoying it. Let us know on social if you are.
And let us know if you want to come and we'll have you on the show. If you're a mobile hero or you know of someone who is, then fill out the interest form over at shorturl.at/JKSKT.
Also, Liftoff has a Slack for mobile heroes and people in the mobile ecosystem. There's a link on the screen. And if you're listening to the podcast, it's at info.liftoff.io/Slack-sign up. It's pretty cool. There's smart people there. And you know what? They probably need you too.
And you have probably been completely blown away by all the insights on this show. And you want your transcript, and you can have it because the transcripts are over at Liftoff's website. Go to liftoff.io, click on Heroes, and then click on Podcast.
I actually personally love transcripts because I read way faster than people talk. So that's a great way to get insights really, really quickly. Until next time, this is John Koetsier. Thank you so much for joining.
And this is Peggy Salz signing off from Mobile Heroes Uncensored.